Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Tweet your comments and questions using the hashtag AJStream. Joining her on the couch today is Ibtihal Mubaarak, a Saudi journalist and blogger. Ibtihal, welcome back to the stream. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Remember, you can always go to our Facebook page where we'll be posting links and various information about the news that we're covering, and you can have a chance to tell us the stories that matter to you. Just go to facebook.com/AJStream.
My name is Russell Shao. I'm a senior research fellow at the Project 2049 Institute, and I'm in the stream.
In Saudi Arabia, journalist Hamza Kashghari could face a death sentence for his controversial tweets about the Prophet Muhammad. Saudi prosecutors are now building a case against Kashghari, who is currently being detained in Riyadh for allegedly insulting the Prophet and disrespecting God. These days, social media is giving the Muslim world new platforms to voice their concerns. But is Islam too taboo for online discussions? Here to help us understand this case are a couple of people. We have we have Mr. Webb. We have an imam currently with us who is a religious scholar, and he's joining us via Skype from Boston. Welcome, Imam Webb. Pardon me. Okay, so we have Muad al-Debagh. He's a Saudi blogger, social activist, and friend of Hamza Kashghari, joining us via Skype from Kent in the U.S. state of Ohio. We'll get to the Imam Webb just momentarily. Muad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
So first of all, talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Hamza and what you know about these tweets in particular.
Well, I'm much older than Hamza, but my relationship with Hamza kind of developed throughout the past 40 years or so. What we have in common is basically a couple of intellectual and philosophical gatherings, and we kind of interacted from there. Some of them are religious, some of them are, purely discussing intellectual matters. And what I personally moderate is a philosophical discussion that he was a part of. And he was one of the people, the young Saudi youth with a very inquisitive mind, and he's very keen on participating in any intellectual event. Now, with regards to the tweets, my personal opinion is the whole thing has nothing to do with religion and has nothing to do with Hamza specifically. It's the whole thing got blown up out of proportion as kind of making an example out of someone that can manifest the whole issues of this religious group that we have in Saudi, to kind of provoke the government against certain intellectual movements and certain specific things. One of them is basically social media, and to make an example is those people will go to the government or the king and say, this is what social media did.
So now, I want to give people some more context on what we're talking about here, and specifically we're going to read these tweets that have come in thus far. First, let's take a look. The tweets seem to show a bit of ambivalence in Hamza's personal faith. He writes, "On your birthday, I will say that I have loved the rebel in you, that you've always been a source of inspiration, and that I do not like the halos of divinity around you. I shall not pray for you." This is specifically speaking to, in a conversation that he's writing with the Prophet Muhammad. He goes on to say, "On your birthday, I find you wherever I turn. I will say that I have loved aspects of you, hated others, and could not understand many more." Then he seems to address the Prophet as an equal. He says, "On your birthday, I shall not kiss your hand. Rather, I shall shake it as equals do, and smile at you as you smile at me. I shall speak to you as a friend and no more." Also joining us today is William Webb, who is an imam and religious scholar, joining us from Boston. Imam, you've heard what we have read just now. There have been claims that this is apostasy by many conservatives within Saudi Arabia and others. How would you respond to those charges?
Yeah, absolutely not. First of all, it's great to be here. In perhaps one of the most important classical legal Maliki books of law, apostasy is defined as something which is sarih, which means something which is absolutely explicit. And when you hear some of the things that this young man wrote, I mean, these are the kind of things I'm encountering almost every other day when I'm talking to young Muslims who have questions about their faith and about the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Okay, so Ibtihal, tell us, you heard actually Muad speak a little bit about the political dimensions of this. What do you think is really at stake here?
I think it's a cynical use of people, of Saudi's deep beliefs to control free speech. I mean, using religion as a political tool is more of an affront to Islam than anything Hamza has said. I think the Saudi government now is alarmed by the uprising surrounding Saudi Arabia and the changes and the revolutions, and also is very alarmed by the increasing popularity of the Muslim Brotherhood movement, especially among Saudi youth, who see in Tunisia, to be specific, as a clear example of when a progressive Islamic view that can be applied, that it can embrace democracy and acknowledges others who are not exactly don't exactly believe in such an idea. So they created this Hamza case out of nothing, and they also gave power. They have a green light with their militia, with their extremist fanatics in the country. There's a small extreme group in Saudi Arabia. They call them As-Sururiya. I want to use the term As-Sururiya. It goes back, they were very powerful in the 90s. They had, there's so many, they had so many terrorist attacks and so on. They always use them as a way. They gave them a green light so they can intimidate others, and that's a very risky political game, not only for Saudi Arabia's safety and security, but for the entire world. We're going back to the 90s. We all know what happened.
We're getting a lot of people commenting about this on Twitter, and I want to get some of their voices into the mix. So, Malika.
Definitely. And aside from the political aspect, Imam Webb, you mentioned earlier that you don't believe that it's apostasy. But let's say that that's the argument being used. We have a question here from Udit Thakur, who says, the Quran makes no mention of blanket death penalty for apostasy. Blasphemy argument is based on precedent set forth by Abu Bakr, who took power after the Prophet. And that leads into this video question, which I'll have you answer, Imam Webb, if you could.
I am against execution because it has no precedence in Islamic jurisdictions. The Prophet never executed those who insulted him before. So Hamza should be set free. Thank you.
Imam Webb, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's two important points. Number one is that even if we're going to take the argument of those who say this is apostasy, it doesn't hold water simply because, as I mentioned earlier, there is no ambiguity around apostasy. Abu Hanifa said that no one leaves Islam except the way they enter Islam, meaning that someone enters into Islam very clearly. When I became Muslim in 1992, I did it in front of the entire community. So he set this beautiful axiom that you cannot leave Islam in something ambiguous. Imam Malik, a great early jurist, said that if I had one reason to believe that someone was a believer and 99 to believe that they were an apostate, I would choose the one that affirms what's called bara'atul dhimma, or the origin of absolute innocence. I agree with what the person on the video said, and the reality is that the execution laws for apostasy are social constructions, legal constructions that formulated around a century or so after the passing of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And these constructions can change according to the reality of the masalih, or the benefits for the people. And here, I think in this age, we can no longer force people to believe by threatening them with death. Thirdly, what I would like to add to the discussion is I would say that I think his critique is more on how people portray their love of the Prophet than his critique of the Prophet. We know that in many circles in the Muslim world, the love for the Prophet has become a fashionable trend. Hence, he talked about kissing the hand and so on and so forth. And I think what he was criticizing, what I would ask him, is I think he was criticizing a certain cultural articulation of religion. And that is a fashion-based articulation instead of being one which is really rooted in serving the society.
So Webb, I want to jump in and actually give some additional context, because some religious scholars feel quite differently. And this is a video of Saudi Sheikh Nasser al-Omar. In it, he calls for Hamza to be punished by death for apostasy. And in this particular point, he criticizes the government for being what he believes to be too complacent.
اعذروني أيها الأخوة لا أستطيع أن ألقي درس اليوم. كيف ألقي درس اليوم والله ورسوله يصبان علانية؟ والله إنني أخشى أن تحل بنا عقوبة عاجلة بما نراه من التساهل في حق الله في جناب الله وجناب رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Now, I want to show you another aspect of this clip just to put it in perspective on what he thinks should be done.
أخاطبه وأخاطب ولي عهد وفقهم الله لكل خير أن يعاقبوا هؤلاء وأن يحيلوهم إلى المحاكم الشرعية التي تتخذ فيهم الحكم الشرعي. ومعروف أن سب الله وأن سب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ردة، أما كونه تراجع في كلام بارد قرأته قبل أن آتي إليكم.
Now, Muad, I want to come to you. I mean, is this not a view that is shared by many potentially in Saudi Arabia?
Well, the Sheikh Al-Omar, he just gave the punchline when he started. The punchline is basically the objective. So what he wants is basically to make the government involved to, exclude some people. And also basically maintain people, and especially the youth. That's what he means. And he said that, first of all, sab, which is basically insulting the Prophet. And we did kind of a social, on Twitter, we did kind of a review. And most of the people who share that kind of an opinion is based on that Hamza did insult the Prophet. Most of them didn't even read what Hamza wrote and didn't even understand the context of whatever Hamza wrote. They're basically taking whatever their sheikhs told them blindly, going on that.
So let's get some more, because this is really, I'm watching my Twitter feed and there's a lot of commentary on this.
Can I chime in real quick with something?
One moment, I'm sorry, Imam. We just want to get a little bit more from our community, then we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I want to open this up a little bit past Saudi to Malaysia, because of course that's where we know that he was detained and then sent back. And Mu'adh, I'll direct this video comment to you.
My name is Nikki Cheong. I'm a Malaysian living in London, and I don't think that Hamza Kashghari situation warrants a death sentence. I also don't agree with Malaysia's decision to send a man back into a country where people are calling for his head and where laws allow for that punishment, especially when he was only in transit and also leaving to avoid persecution.
So, Mu'adh, if you could extrapolate a little bit on what was the reasoning that he decided to go back, through Malaysia. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, a couple of my friends, we advised him to get out of the country. Now you have to put things in context, as I mentioned. First of all, for many different religious figures have been pushing for people to kill him, before the government involvement in this specific case. So there was a lot of death threats. There was a lot of people actually putting money on his head. And people posting his number, his home address, pictures of him, and what car that he drives, and that license plates and everything. So the kind of rationale behind him leaving is, first of all, before the warrant from the king of his arrest, is to get out of the country as far as possible for a long period of time until things cool down, and then he comes back. Then he flew, and in 2 days, an arrest of his warrant from the king, which is quite ironic, to be honest with you. Saudi has been, stumbling around on the issue of the Jeddah floods, where many people died, and still nothing came out of the king and the government. While in 2 days, something said something from Twitter. And now there's a warrant for his arrest.
I want to bring up another point, and I want to direct this to you, Imam Webb. This is from @Atif Ahmad on Twitter, saying religious scholars have used blasphemy laws to persecute people. The Prophet Muhammad was the most kind of human beings. How would you respond to that?
No, I mean, I agree. It's very clear, the issue of apostasy laws themselves are not something which is etched in stone. I mean, the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were at least 3 or 4 occasions in his lifetime where people actually clearly apostated. You know, Abdullah ibn Sa'd, he apostated in Medina, and the Prophet did not order for anything to happen to him. He was left alone. He was not harmed. And again, as I mentioned, those were legal constructions that came later on, many of them having to do with the backdrop of the Crusades, as well as interactions with Muslims, with non-Muslims. So again, I don't see how this is applicable to this young man in Saudi Arabia.
But Ibtihal, let's think about this from the other perspective. He is in Saudi Arabia. We know that there's a very conservative form of Islam that's practiced in Saudi Arabia. And is it not reasonable to expect that a journalist, a public figure there, would know that tweets of this nature could be construed in a controversial manner by other people? Is it possible that he went too far?
Well, the Saudi people, I would say they're mainly conservative, but they're not extremist. We have a minority of extremists, and the government keep allying themselves. Their power is derived from those extremists. And by all, as Hamza's friend Mu'adh said, that all the death threats, all the violent death threats, they had like pictures of his house. This only proved one thing, that those people, after 10 years from September 11, after the government pledged to the world that they're gonna, reform the curriculums at schools, that they will have national dialogues, those people are still able to produce such violent and desire for revenge and seeking blood. And also they're very good, if you notice, like all of the sheikhs on Twitter, as if they all have the same script, the same script. They are very good at mobilizing people. And the government are letting them away and going away from this because they only want to counter not the Saudi liberals, but everyone who speaks out their mind, everyone who calls for true reform. Now we're witnessing the uprising around us. Would Saudi Arabia still be in the dark ages?
You speak about Saudi liberals. How strong is the liberal population?
No, I said it's not only targeting Saudi liberals, it's also targeting the Muslim Brotherhood, increasing popularity in Saudi Arabia. Actually, two young group of Saudis issued two statements supporting Hamza. One was of a secular one, and one was of the reform, the young activists from the young reformers from the Muslim Brotherhoods. And both of them condemned Hamza's prosecution, both of them that a thought can only be countered by another thought, that he is not, it's not the government job to go after each and every one and suspect their faith.
Well, I want to actually, on that point, because you brought up the Muslim Brotherhood, there's been a lot of dialogue about the strength of the Muslim Brotherhood currently in Egypt. And this is a comment about Sheikh Ali Ghoma, who's the Grand Mufti of Egypt. And he made this comment, this statement saying, we don't kill our sons, we talk to them. And he also went further to say, we need to look at 3 points before we make any judgments. Are we sure he really said what everyone was repeating? Secondly, we need to categorize the actual statements he made. Are they a form of misconduct or an expression of doubt or an actual insult? I want to take this back to Mu'adh before we get back to our community. Is there space in Islam for a real public dialogue and questioning of one's faith?
Well, I think, in the opening I said, I don't think it has anything to do with religion. Is about this subsect of a subsect in Saudi Arabia who basically used to dominate religious thinking, and now they're kind of nervous and they want to create an example out of Hamza. Yes. It's dishonest. Everyone knows that. But to them, the end justifies the means. I don't think that has anything to do with religion or Islam.
Okay, Malika?
Well, Mu'adh, on the back of that, I'd like to pose this question from David Walco on Twitter, who says, what are Saudi's incentives to release Hamza Kashgari? Let me make this a little bit bigger for the screen. Will international pressure truly be backed with consequences? Mu'adh, if you could respond to that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, what are Saudi's incentives to releasing Hamza? Will they, us talking about it here and the response on Twitter, is international pressure going to do anything?
Well, I think it will. And not only that, if they, I don't think the Saudi government has any benefit in detaining Hamza other than pleasing those religious fanatics. However, post 9/11, everyone knows that they're not doing good to any Saudi society. They're not doing good to the world. So they're trying to basically utilize the mob to kind of scare the government into doing stuff. The incentive, I think, is that's what's good for humanity and for the Saudi community and the Saudi society. That's my only take on it.
Ibtihal, what do you think is the role of this in the Saudi society? What do you think is the potential impact of this case on those who might potentially speak out, but also on those who, you know, believe that, hey, we should be circumspect in what we say online?
Well, as I said earlier, that the Saudi government is using a technique that they skillfully used in the 90s, but they think that time stopped for them at that point. People, I mean, if they're gonna you know, put one guy as a scapegoat, and others will come. Not only Hamza. Hamza is the first one. If they're gonna push hard, Saudis also, young activists will push harder. That will intimidate a number, but it will anger the majority. I mean, people are not that. I mean, we cannot just be blinded by you know, them saying they're holier than God. I mean, everyone saw the WikiLeaks where the Saudi royal family have their parties and drinking and, you know, you name it, not in Las Vegas, not in London, not in Spain, inside Saudi Arabia. And where is that weeping cleric from that? Could he say a word against that? Where's that? Everyone knows this hypocrisy that we're living in. And back to Hamza. Hamza, I mean, is not like, he's not a renewed columnist. He's a young journalist, a young graduate from college. He was a contributing columnist for Al Bilad newspaper that had, you know, wanted to include the young people in its editorial. And also he was, just I want to mention, he was a very active part of this progressive community in Jeddah, like Bridges bookstore.
On that point, I want to talk about that progressive community in Jeddah in the post show. But before we go, Imam Webb, we have a quick question for you about the Quran burning incident in Afghanistan and the response. What is your take on NATO's treatment of the holy books?
Well, I definitely think desecrating any person's religious books is something which, you know, is abhorred. I believe there's a Geneva Convention regarding that. I think their apology was hopefully sincere. But what's interesting is that they're not apologizing for killing, you know, innocent Afghanis, which I think is even more important.
So I want to jump in right there because we're going to continue that aspect of the conversation, both on Twitter blasphemy and the Quran burning in the post show. But first, here's Malika with more on this issue of the Quran.
As anger rises in Afghanistan, you've called on us to cover what the U.S. military says was the accidental burning of a Quran at a NATO airbase. Lamia tweeted, currently protesters are rioting outside Bagram prison over Quran burning. Muslim scholars need to discuss issues like this. Responding with violence is not our tradition. Well, hundreds have rallied across Afghanistan in protest, but the demonstrations, which led to deadly clashes with police in some places, also sparked this call from some Afghan youth. Ahmed Shuja tweets, alternative protest ideas for Afghanistan. Protest the freezing to death of destitute children. Their campaign appears to have taken off. Courtney Body tweets, alternative protest ideas for Afghanistan. Protest women burned by acid or in the burn units of hospital. For more on this story, be sure to check out our coverage of it on the Stream's website. Our next story is gathering steam after reports surfaced that the New York Police Department monitored Muslim college students across the Northeast. Wajahad Ali started the hashtag MyNYPDFile with this tweet. We started MyNYPDFile. Why make them waste resource, energy, money, and secret spying? Just tell them what you do. I look at pork, but I don't eat it. We'll discuss the story of police monitoring next week, so tweet us your thoughts using the hashtag AJStream.
Thank you, Malika. Appreciate that. Thanks. Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. On Thursday, is Senegal's long tradition of democracy under threat? We look at the unrest sweeping the country ahead of next week's presidential election. Send us your comments on that. Till then, tweet us using the hashtag AJStream. We're continuing the conversation right now on this quote-unquote case of Twitter blasphemy. Stay with us. We'll see you online. Hi, welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation on this case of Hamza Kashgari in Saudi Arabia. I want to come back to you, Muad, and get a little bit deeper into something that Ibtihal was touching on, and I want to get her thoughts on that as well. And that is this idea of groups of people in Saudi Arabia who are maybe making statements that might be contrary to the perceived interest of the government. What room is there in the Saudi society currently for dissent?
For what? Can you
dissent?
Repeat? Well, I don't think that the group, the youth groups. I'm trying to understand your question. You're saying that what's room of freedom of discussions and
yes, like is there real opportunity for people to come together and say we disagree with the way things are run in this society and we would like to say make a difference? What is the actual space for criticism of the status quo?
Well, government involvement is not that much, to be honest with you, specifically in the last couple of years. I'm talking about not political kind of gatherings. I'm talking about in general, kind of being critical. But however, the utilization of the mob is the main issue over here. You know, the religious authorities or whatever, they are the main boundary with the blessing of the government. And then at the end, they say we're not. You know, the government is not involved, but it's religion. That's the kind of game that's being played right now in Saudi Arabia, and that's the main kind of hurdle in front of most of youth-driven progressive groups that they are trying to discuss and criticize and think out of the box in a way. You know, there's always some guy or you know, who keeps on telling other people, and then we have what they call muhtasibin, who are from a religious background, coming to stop these kind of movements.
So, Ibtihal, talk to us a little bit about what has been the impact of the Arab awakening or Arab Spring on youth in Saudi Arabia.
Well, youth in Saudi Arabia is not different from the other youth of the rest of the Arab world. Saudi Arabia is not immune to the Arab Spring. They have to realize this, and if they want to keep this country as it is, with this name, with this structure, they have to transfer their alliance from those zealous extremists to a civil country. It's a country with real institutions.
But
and this is where the West,
this is where helping to maintain the current government.
Well, they should make the change. Things are not going the way they used to be. Let's put it this way. And it's not only the West, the entire world. This is for the security and safety. I mean, we've seen September 11. We've seen so many attacks around the world. If they're gonna like harbor this extreme interpretation of Islam, I mean, how will it go from now on? I mean, what is the outcome? No one really knows. And I want to just make a clear thing here about Hamza's background. Hamza, one of his acquaintances, I mean, not even a close friend of Hamza, wrote this beautiful testimony about him called the Hamza I Know. And he explained clearly that he was a very active member of this progressive community in Jeddah, Bridges Bookstore, who all the members now are under attack. Actually, one of their teachers or like instructors is a great columnist, a researcher, Abdullah Hamid al-Din. He is specifically under attack by the same sheikh who were targeting Hamza. They are accusing him of spreading, quote unquote, atheism ideas among youth, that he is the one inciting them for that. And anyway, so I just want to show you this clip, that this is the symbol of what the young Saudis are doing now. This is a peaceful protest. They filmed that. They had it on YouTube. It's on the anniversary that was broadcasted here, January 26th, which is the second anniversary of Jeddah floods. For 2 years, last year, 2011 and 2010, can you believe that Saudi Arabia, the richest country of the world, we don't have a functioning sewer system, that when rain is heavier this season, that people die, hundreds actually, non-government statistics said it like thousands were dead. And nothing, as Muaad has been, when someone said something on Twitter, he is followed until Malaysia and brought back. When people, I mean, this is like massive death, and nothing was prosecuted. Nothing was prosecuted. And this is what's filmed by this young activist and put on YouTube as a witness for the future. We can see this.
So explain what we're seeing here. Go ahead and let it play.
This said, this is, okay, these are like dead bodies that symbolize people who died in the flood. It said objecting the government corruption. And they filmed this around Jeddah and famous places in Jeddah. This is like representing the, it said here, to develop a peaceful, the culture of peaceful demonstration. That's what it said. So it's encouraging
So these are young activists that have shrouded themselves in these blue cloths to symbolize the dead.
The dead bodies, that no one, I mean, there were no, no one was accused, no one was put in charge of what happened. And it's such a shame. He said, we will not let our case drawn.
Yeah. So I want to come back to our community because this is something that is quite controversial to many. What are you hearing people say, Malika?
Well, there's lots of discussion about this. A few people are saying that I don't want my religion blasphemed. But then there's a tweet here from Rina Sassi who says, I don't find his tweets blasphemous, just against current mainstream narrative on Islam. But there are many. And that kind of goes nicely into this tweet from Voicing Islam, who says, historically, Islam welcomed religious and intellectual debate. How does that reflect Hamza Kashgari's situation?
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to have to leave this conversation. I want to thank you, Muad, Imam Webb. Thank you so much for being with us, Ibtihal. This has been really good. We've got another story that we want to come into. I'm going to turn it over to Malika, who is looking at what's going on right now in Kenyan social media.
Thanks, Derek. Well, today we're going over to Sood Haider, who's a member of Al Jazeera's new media team in Nairobi. Sood, I know you have an interesting story that's been trending online in Kenya. I'm hearing that we don't actually have him yet.
So, yeah, before we get to Sood, I want to get his thoughts in just a moment. But before we jump to that, Ibtihal, I mean, it really seems like Saudi could potentially be in a moment for a possible change. But for most people looking from the outside in, it would seem that the regime is strong enough and international backing is strong enough for them for obvious reasons. This is a major energy producer, a very wealthy country. How much likelihood is there that the pressure from externally and internally will be enough to foment real change?
Well, I would start by saying no one expected what happened in Tunisia. No one expected what happened in Egypt. Saudi Arabia is a ticking bomb. We have 60% of the population are youth. I believe 40% or 45% are unemployed. So what could have been happen? No one exactly, I mean, I could not predict that. There are daily demonstrations in the Eastern Province, daily demonstrations happening. People are dying. I mean, there are attempts. I mean, you can see from Hamza's friend testimony. I suggest that everyone goes there and read it. The Hamza, I know it's in Mashallah News website, that there is a young active movement, but as you said, it is so hard because the government, I mean, here's the government that doesn't allow even student clubs at universities.
I mean, it's a really complex story.
It is for the world benefit, it's for the West benefit. It's like, hey, look, Saudi Arabia, if this will not, I mean, this international community can put pressure on Saudi Arabia. It's not only to release Hamza, but also to stop. I mean, we're not going back to the 90s.
So we're going to have to follow this story closely to see how it evolves and how both internal and external pressure plays in. I want to come back to you, Malika, because I know that you had been speaking with another Al Jazeera journalist in Kenya